My name is David. I'm 27 years old. And last week my own brother destroyed the most valuable thing I owned because he wanted to go on a date. Before I tell you how his moment of rage ended up costing my parents their entire life savings and left them with absolutely nothing, let me know where you guys are watching from in the comments. I read every single one. I want to paint a picture for you. Imagine a house where the walls are thin, the carpet is stained with 20 years of boot mud, and the air always smells like a mixture of frying grease and stale beer. That was my home in Ohio. It was a house built on hard labor, I'll give it that. My father, Frank, worked 40 years at the local packaging plant. My brother, Mark, who is 3 years older than me, followed right in his footsteps. They were big men. Broad shoulders, calloused hands, the kind of guys who could open a beer bottle with their teeth and thought reading a book was something you only did if the TV was broken. Then there was me. I was the mistake. I was the runt of the litter. While Mark was out playing varsity football and getting into fights behind the bleachers, I was inside taking apart toasters to see how they worked. My dad used to look at me with this specific kind of confusion, like he couldn't figure out how his DNA had produced someone who preferred calculus to carburetors. For the last 4 years, I have been a ghost in that house. I was a PhD candidate in chemical engineering. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Oh, a college boy. But let me tell you, a PhD isn't like undergrad. It's not parties and skipping class. It is a grueling, soul-crushing marathon. I was working 18-hour days. My eyes were permanently bloodshot. I lived on caffeine pills and instant noodles because my stipend was barely enough to cover tuition and the rent my parents insisted I pay. That's right. I lived at home to save money, but my dad still charged me $500 a month for a room that didn't even have air conditioning. He called it preparing me for the real world. He said if I wasn't going to have a real job like him and Mark, I had to pay my way. To them, my research was a joke. They didn't understand it, so they mocked it. I was working on a government-funded project regarding polymer filtration systems. It sounds boring, but it's the kind of technology that changes how we purify water. It was serious work. It was dangerous work if you didn't calculate the pressure variables right. But to Mark, I was just playing video games. Hey, Einstein, he'd say, kicking my door open while I was in the middle of a complex simulation. Mom made meatloaf. Get your face out of the screen. I dealt with it. I swallowed the insults. I ignored the snide comments at Thanksgiving when my uncles would ask Mark about the factory union, and then ask me if I was still in school with a pitying laugh. I took it all because I had a goal. I was going to be Dr. David Harrison. I was going to get a job in a lab where people spoke in hushed tones and respected silence. I was going to make a salary that didn't require breaking my back. And I was so close. It was Friday. The most important weekend of my entire life. My thesis defense was scheduled for Monday morning at 9 a.m. For those who don't know, the defense is the endgame. You stand in front of a committee of experts and they grill you. If you pass, you're a doctor. If you fail, years of your life are wasted. But before the defense, there was the data submission. I had a hard deadline of Saturday morning tomorrow to upload the final process simulation data to the committee server. If that file wasn't uploaded by noon on Saturday, I wouldn't be allowed to defend. Automatic failure. Loss of funding. Game over. I was sitting at my desk. It was a wobbly card table I'd set up in the corner of my bedroom. The heat in the room was stifling. It was mid-July, and the window unit had died 3 years ago. Mark had AC in his room, of course. He needed his rest. I just had a box fan pushing hot air around. I was staring at the screen of my laptop. This wasn't just any laptop. This was a Dell Precision mobile workstation. It was a beast of a machine, loaned to me by the university lab because my personal computer couldn't handle the processing load. It was worth about $5,500. It was heavy, rugged, and fast. Connected to it via a USB-C cable was my external hard drive, a sleek, black brick with a blinking blue light. That drive was my life. It held the raw data, the localized backups, the simulation logs that were too big to keep on the cloud in real time. I was in the zone. I had noise-canceling headphones on, trying to drown out the sound of the TV blaring downstairs. I was tweaking the final variable on the beta sequence. I remember feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I was going to make it. Just 12 more hours of rendering, upload the file, and I was free. Then the door slammed open. It hit the wall with a bang that shook the floorboards. I jumped, ripping my headphones off. Mark stood in the doorway. He looked frantic, which was rare for him. Usually, Mark moved with the slow, heavy confidence of a guy who knew he was the biggest person in the room. But today he was sweating. He was holding a bundle of gray fabric in his hand. "David, get up," he barked. I spun my chair around. "What?" "Mark, I'm working. I told you, do not disturb me tonight." "I don't care about your homework," Mark said, stepping into the room. He smelled like the factory, machine oil and sweat. He threw the bundle at me. It hit me in the chest. It was his work uniform. The gray shirt with Mark stitched on the pocket, stiff with dried grease. "Put it on," he said. He was already turning to the mirror on my closet door, checking his hair. "I need you to cover for me." I stared at the shirt in my lap, then back at him. "Cover for you? Are you insane?" "I got a date," Mark said, grinning at his reflection. He was combing back his hair with his fingers. "Cindy, the girl from the diner? The one with the blonde hair?" She finally said yes. "We're going to the steakhouse out on Route 9. But I'm scheduled for the night shift, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. "So reschedule the date," I said, throwing the shirt onto the floor. "I'm not doing your shift." Mark turned slowly. The grin vanished. "I can't reschedule. She's off tonight. If I say no, she moves on. You know how it is." "Actually, no, you don't. When was the last time you even talked to a girl?" "I don't have time for this," I said, turning back to my screens. "Get out of my room, Mark. I have a deadline." "You used to work the line," Mark said, his voice dropping to that bullying tone I knew so well. "Summer break, remember? You know the machines. Just go in, swipe my badge. My buddy Rick is the shift lead tonight, he won't say anything. Just keep your head down and load the crates." "That was 5 years ago," I snapped. "And that is fraud, Mark. I'm not going to risk going to jail so you can eat a steak." "Nobody goes to jail for covering a shift," Mark yelled. "God, you are such a drama queen. It's 8 hours. Easy money. I'll even let you keep the pay for the night." "I don't want your money," I said. "I want to finish my degree. I have to submit this data tomorrow morning. If I leave now, the render stops. If the render stops, I fail. Do you understand English?" "Will. Fail." Mark took a step closer. He was 6'2", 250 pounds of muscle built from lifting heavy boxes. I was 5'10" and built from sitting in a library. "You think you're better than me?" Mark said softly. "Here we go," I muttered. "You think because you read big books you're too good to do honest work?" He kicked the uniform on the floor. "That shirt puts food on the table. That shirt paid for the roof over your head." "Dad paid for the roof," I corrected him. "And I pay Dad rent. I don't owe you anything, Mark. You owe this family respect," Mark shouted. Veins were popping out in his neck. "I work 60 hours a week. I break my back. I deserve one night off. You sit here in the AC all day playing on the computer." "I don't have AC," I yelled back, gesturing to the fan. "And this isn't playing. This is a career. It's a hobby," Mark screamed. "A doctorate? What kind of doctor doesn't cure people? A fake one. That's what you are. A fake." The noise must have alerted Dad. I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Great. Now I was outnumbered. Dad walked in holding a can of cheap beer. He was wearing his undershirt and boxers. He looked at Mark, red-faced and panting, and then at me sitting in my chair. "What is the problem now?" Dad asked, taking a sip of beer. "I'm trying to watch the game. David's refusing to help the family," Mark said, pointing a finger at me like a tattletale child. "I got that date with Cindy. I asked him to cover one shift. One. and he's acting like I asked him to cut off a leg. Dad looked at me. His eyes were dull. There was no sympathy there. David, your brother needs a break. He's been pulling doubles. Dad, I have my defense on Monday, I pleaded. I tried to keep my voice calm, reasonable. I have to upload the data tonight. It's the final step of my PhD. If I go to the factory, I can't finish. Dad looked at the screens. He looked at the graphs and the code scrolling by. He didn't understand any of it, so he dismissed it. The machine does the work, doesn't it? Dad asked. Just leave it running. It needs monitoring, I explained. If the temperature variance spikes, I have to adjust it manually or the data corrupts. I have to be here. Dad shook his head. Always an excuse. Your brother is right. You've been living in a fantasy world. It's time you stepped up and did some real work. Earn some real money for once. I have a stipend, I said through gritted teeth. Peanuts, Dad scoffed. Go do the shift, David. Stop being selfish. I'm not going, I said. I planted my feet. I am not going to the factory. Mark can call in sick, or he can miss his date. But I am not sacrificing my future for his Friday night. The room went silent. I had never defied a direct order from Dad before. Usually I folded. I just wanted peace. But this time the stakes were too high. This wasn't just about inconvenience. It was about my life. Mark looked at Dad. Dad shrugged. A small gesture that said handle it. Mark turned back to me. His face wasn't red anymore. It was pale with rage. He felt humiliated. His little nerd brother had said no. You're not going? Mark asked quietly. No, I said. You're too busy with your little toy? He gestured to the laptop. It's not a toy, I said. If you didn't have the toy, Mark said, a cruel smile spreading across his face, then you wouldn't be busy, right? My stomach dropped. I saw his eyes flick to the laptop. Mark, I said, holding up a hand. Don't. Problem solved, Mark said. He lunged. I want you to understand the physics of the moment. I'm a scientist, so I think in terms of force and reaction. But in that second, all my education vanished. It was just primal fear. Mark didn't aim for me. If he had hit me, I could have taken it. I've taken his punches before. A bruise heals. A broken nose sets. But he went for the one thing he knew would hurt me more than physical pain. He reached past my shoulder. His hand, thick and greasy, clamped onto the open lid of the Dell Precision workstation. No! I screamed. It was a guttural sound, ripped from my throat. I grabbed his forearm, trying to pull him back. It was like trying to move a hydraulic piston. He didn't even flinch. He just shoved me backward with his free hand. I flew back, my chair tipping over. I hit the floor hard, my head banging against the leg of the dresser. Stars exploded in my vision. Mark, stop. Please. I scrambled to my knees, dizzy and sick. Mark ripped the laptop off the desk. The sound of the cables tearing out was sickening. The USB-C connector snapped. The HDMI cable ripped out of the port, taking a piece of the motherboard with it. The power cord whipped through the air like an angry snake. The screen flickered wildly. Blue, green, then black, as the connection to the external drive was severed abruptly. Mark held the machine over his head. He looked like a caveman discovering fire and deciding to stomp it out. This is what's keeping you here? Mark yelled. This piece of junk? That's university property. I shrieked, scrambling to my feet. It's worth $5,000. Mark, put it down. $5,000? Dad scoffed from the doorway. For a computer? Don't lie to your brother, David. I'm not lying, I begged. It's a workstation. Please mark the data. Mark looked at me. He saw the genuine terror in my eyes. And he loved it. It made him feel powerful. It made him feel like the big man again. You need to learn, Mark said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Real life isn't on a screen. He threw it. He didn't just drop it. He spiked it. He put his full weight, all 250 pounds of factory-honed muscle, into slamming that machine onto the hardwood floor. Crack. The sound was like a gunshot. It was loud, sharp, and violent. Plastic shattered. Metal bent. I saw keys fly off the keyboard like teeth being knocked out. The chassis, made of magnesium alloy, buckled in the middle. The screen didn't just crack. It pulverized. The liquid crystal bled out instantly, turning the display into a jagged, black ink blot. I stood there, frozen. My breath caught in my chest. My ears were ringing. Mark stood over the wreckage, breathing heavy. "There," he said. "Now you're free." I stared at the pile of debris. Smoke, thin and acrid, started to rise from the battery casing. The smell of ozone and fried electronics filled the small room. "You!" I couldn't even form words. "You just..." But he wasn't done. Mark looked down at the desk. The laptop was gone, but the external hard drive was still there. The little black box. The blue light was blinking frantically, searching for a connection that no longer existed. "And this?" Mark said, reaching for it. "No!" I lunged at him. I actually tried to tackle him. Dad stepped in. He moved faster than I thought he could. He grabbed me by the back of my shirt and yanked me back. "Let him finish," Dad said. "You need to learn a lesson about priorities." "Dad, that's the backup!" I screamed, tears streaming down my face now. "That's 4 years of work. That's the only copy." "Dad, please." Mark picked up the drive. It was small in his massive hands. Portable Seagate drive. Fragile. He looked at me, held the drive up to his face, and smiled. It was a smile I will never forget as long as I live. It was the smile of someone who enjoys destroying beautiful things because they can't understand them. "No doctorate for you," Mark said. He placed his thumbs in the middle of the drive. He started to bend it. "Mark, don't. I'll do the shift. I'll do anything," I begged. I sold my soul in that moment. "I'll pay you. Just put it down." "Too late," Mark whispered. Snap. It wasn't a loud sound. It was a dry, crisp snap. The plastic casing gave way. Inside, the glass platters, the discs that held the molecular secrets of a new polymer, the result of thousands of hours of coding, shattered. I heard the grinding noise of the shards sliding against each other. Mark pulled his hands apart. The drive was in 2 pieces, connected only by a thin ribbon cable. He twisted it, ripping the cable. He tossed the 2 halves onto the corpse of the laptop. "Oops," Mark said. "Butterfingers." My heart stopped. I mean, literally, for a second, I think my heart stopped beating. I looked at the pile on the floor. My future, my degree, my funding, my reputation, all of it turned into garbage in less than 30 seconds. Dad took a slow sip of his beer. He looked at the mess, then at me. "Right," Dad said, nodding. "Now that the toys are gone, maybe you can earn some real money." "Yeah," Mark laughed. "Go get the uniform, Davy. You're gonna be late." The whole family jeered. I could hear my mom downstairs. She must have heard the smashing. She must have heard my screaming. But she was laughing. A nervous, high-pitched laugh, probably talking to the neighbor on the phone. "Oh, the boys are just roughhousing." I stood there. My hands were shaking. My knees were shaking. I looked at Mark. He was beaming. He felt justified. He felt like he had done me a favor by destroying my distractions. "Well," Mark said, "what are you waiting for? Get dressed." Something broke inside me then. But it wasn't my spirit. It was the chain that had tethered me to these people for 27 years. The guilt, the obligation, the desperate need for their approval. It all snapped just like that hard drive. I looked at Mark. I looked at his sweaty face, his cruel eyes. I looked at Dad, bloated and indifferent. I didn't scream anymore. I didn't cry anymore. The silence in the room became heavy. They were waiting for me to explode. They were waiting for the tantrum so they could call me a baby. I didn't give it to them. I turned around and walked to my closet. "That's it," Mark said, nudging Dad. "See? He knows who's boss." I reached into the closet. I didn't grab the uniform. I grabbed my old JanSport backpack. I walked over to the dresser. I opened the top drawer. I took out my wallet. I took out my passport. I took out the spare key to my rusty 2010 Honda Civic. "Hey," Dad said, frowning. "What are you doing? The uniform is on the floor." I ignored him. I walked over to the pile of electronic debris. I knelt down. "Leave it," Mark said. "Trash goes out on Tuesday." I picked up the twisted metal of the laptop. It was sharp. It cut my finger. I didn't care. I put it in the backpack. I picked up the two halves of the hard drive. I put them in the side pocket. I picked up every loose key, every shard of plastic I could find. "I'm talking to you, boy," Dad shouted. His voice had that warning growl that used to make me wet the bed when I was 6. I stood up. I zipped the bag. I looked at them. Really looked at them. "You're not going to the factory?" Mark asked, confused. I walked past him. I didn't shoulder check him. I just walked around him like he was a piece of furniture. "David," Dad yelled. "You walk out that door. Don't you bother coming back for dinner." I walked out of the room. I walked down the hallway where the family photos hung. Photos of Mark holding trophies, and me standing in the background. "You hear me?" Dad roared from the top of the stairs. "You turn your back on this family, you're cut off. No inheritance. Nothing. Inheritance." The word almost made me laugh. The only inheritance I was going to get from them was high blood pressure and trauma. "He's running away," Mark yelled, laughing again. "Run, Forrest, run. Go cry to your books." I walked out the front door. The evening air was hot and humid, but it tasted sweet. Tasted like oxygen. I got into my car. My hands were trembling so hard I dropped the keys twice. I took a deep breath. I started the engine. Sputtered, then caught. Mark came out onto the porch, beer in hand now. "Don't come back until you're ready to apologize," he screamed. I put the car in reverse. I backed out of the driveway. I didn't look at the house. I watched the road. I drove. I drove past the factory where the smokestacks were belching gray clouds into the twilight. I drove past the high school where Mark was a hero and I was a target. I didn't go to a friend's house. I didn't go to a bar. I drove straight to the 4th Precinct police station. The drive to the police station took 20 minutes. For the first 10 minutes, I was in shock. My brain was trying to process the visual of the laptop snapping. Kept replaying on a loop. Snap, crack, snap, crack. But for the last 10 minutes, the shock turned into something else. Turned into a cold, hard calculation. I began to think like an engineer again. Problem. Destruction of property. Variable 1. Value of hardware, $5,500. Variable 2. Value of data, incalculable/government grant. Variable 3. Intent, malicious. Solution, maximum legal penalty. I pulled into the police station parking lot. I turned off the car. I sat there in the silence. I looked at the backpack on the passenger seat. It looked like a body bag for my dreams. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I had 3 missed calls from home. I blocked the number. I dialed Professor Henderson. It was 7:45 p.m. on a Friday. He was probably having dinner with his wife. I hated to do this, but I had no choice. "Hello." His voice was warm, unsuspecting. "Professor Henderson," I said. My voice sounded flat, robot-like. "This is David Harrison." "David, I was just thinking about you. Are we on track for the noon upload tomorrow?" "There has been an incident," I said. "The workstation has been destroyed." Silence. Long, heavy silence. "Destroyed?" Henderson asked. "What do you mean? Did you drop it?" "No," I said. "It was intentionally destroyed. Smashed. My brother, he had a disagreement with me. He destroyed the laptop and he snapped the external backup drive in half." "My God," Henderson whispered. "David, are you okay? Were you hurt?" "I'm fine. Physically. The data," Henderson said, his voice tightening. The Beta 3 simulations. David, tell me. The local drives are gone, I said. Irretrievable. The platters are shattered. I heard Henderson inhale sharply. I could hear the panic setting in. That grant was his life's work too. David, tell me you have the cloud sync active. I closed my eyes. I flashed back to a month ago. I was setting up the workstation. The internet at my parents' house was slow, agonizingly slow. Dad refused to upgrade from the basic DSL package. Took hours to upload anything. I remembered being frustrated. I remembered almost turning off the autosync because it slowed down my rendering. Did I turn it off? David, Henderson prompted. I think so, I said. I set it to run at 3 a.m. every night. If it ran last night, then we only lost today's work. About 12 hours of data. You need to verify that, Henderson said. Immediately. I can't, I said. I don't have a computer. I'm in the parking lot of the police station. The police station? Yes, I'm going in to press charges. This was university property, Professor. Federal grant property. I'm not letting him get away with this. Good, Henderson said, his voice hardening. He was a nice guy, but when it came to his research, he was a pit bull. You file that report. I'm calling the dean. And I'm calling the university legal counsel. David, listen to me. Do not minimize this. This isn't a family squabble. This is destruction of state assets. We will support you. Thank you, I said. I'll call you when I have a case number. I hung up. I grabbed the backpack. I walked into the station. The lobby was bright. Too bright. It smelled like floor wax and old coffee. The desk sergeant was a woman named Officer Higgins. She looked bored, scrolling on her phone. Can I help you? She asked without looking up. I want to report a felony, I said. That made her look up. She saw me. A guy in a t-shirt and jeans holding a backpack, looking like he just walked out of a war zone. What kind of felony, honey? Grand larceny, malicious destruction of property, and interference with a federal government project. She blinked. Okay, have a seat. I'll get a detective. I sat on a hard wooden bench. I watched the clock on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Every second that passed was a second. Mark was probably laughing about what he did. 10 minutes later, Detective Miller came out. He was a guy in his 40s, rumpled suit, tie loosened. He looked tired. Mr. Harrison? He asked. Come on back. I followed him into an interrogation room. It wasn't like on TV. It was small, drab, and smelled like stale cigarettes. So, Miller said, sitting down and opening a notebook, Officer Higgins says you're talking about federal projects? That's a big word. It's accurate, I said. I unzipped the backpack. I appended it onto the metal table. The pieces clattered out. The bent chassis, the shattered screen, the keys, and finally the two halves of the hard drive. Miller looked at the mess. He whistled low. Damn, someone was angry. Who did this? My brother, Mark Harrison. Why? He wanted me to work his shift at the packaging plant so he could go on a date. I said no because I have a PhD defense on Monday. He didn't like no. Miller looked at me, assessing. Okay, domestic dispute. He broke your laptop. Not my laptop, I corrected him. State University's laptop. Value, $5,500. Miller stopped writing. He looked up. $5,000. Yes, it's a specialized workstation. And the hard drive. The data on it is part of an NSF grant. National Science Foundation. It represents about 3 years of labor and hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding. Miller leaned back. The boredom was gone from his face. And you say he did this on purpose? He looked me in the eye, I said, my voice trembling slightly. He said, no doctorate for you. And then he snapped the drive. He knew it was work. He knew it was valuable. I told him. I begged him. I told him it was the university's. He called it a toy and smashed it. Miller tapped his pen on the table. David, if we write this up the way you're saying, this is serious. Malicious destruction over $1,000 is a Class 4 felony in this state. Plus, the federal angle. If the university pushes it, your brother is looking at prison time. Real prison time. Not county jail. He looked at me intently. It's your brother. Are you sure you want to pull this trigger? Once we start this, you can't just say, never mind tomorrow. I thought about the uniform hitting my face. I thought about Dad saying earn real money. I thought about the years of being made to feel small. He's not my brother, I said. The words tasted like ash. But they were true. He's a criminal who destroyed my life because he was lazy. Write it up. I want to press full charges. Miller nodded. He respected that. Okay, let's get to work. We spent the next hour documenting everything. I gave him the serial numbers. I gave him the grant number stamped on the bottom of the casing. I gave him the address of the house. I gave him the name of the steakhouse where Mark was headed. He's probably there now, I said. Steakhouse on Route 9. He's with a girl named Cindy. We'll pick him up, Miller said. But first, I need to confirm the value with the university. Standard procedure. Call them, I said. They're expecting your call. Miller stepped out. I sat alone in the room with the broken pieces of my life. I touched the jagged edge of the hard drive. Snap. It was the sound of a bridge burning. And I was the one lighting the match. While I was sitting in the sterile safety of the police station, the wheels of justice began to turn. And let me tell you, when the state university gets involved, those wheels turn fast and they grind heavy. Detective Miller came back into the room about 20 minutes later. He looked different, more alert. Okay, David, he said. I just got off the phone with the university's general counsel and their chief of police. You weren't kidding. They are furious. I told you, I said. They are faxing over the affidavits of ownership and value right now. They want us to secure the suspect immediately. They're treating this as a major theft and destruction case. Miller clipped his radio onto his belt. We're going to get him. He's at the steakhouse, I repeated. He thinks he won. Not for long, Miller said. I didn't go with them. Couldn't. I stayed at the station to finish my written statement. But I learned exactly what happened later from the police report and from what Cindy, poor Cindy, posted on Facebook later. It was 9 p.m. The steakhouse was packed. It was the nice place in town, the place you went for anniversaries or paydays. Mark was sitting in a booth with Cindy. He was probably 3 beers deep. He was probably telling her some exaggerated story about how he handled business at home, about how he was the alpha male of the Harrison household. Imagine him, laughing, cutting into a ribeye steak, thinking his little brother was sweating on an assembly line right now, learning his lesson. Then the doors opened. Detective Miller didn't go alone. He took 2 uniformed officers with him. They walked through the dining room. The chatter stopped. People looked. In a small town, police walking into a restaurant means something big is going down. They walked right up to table 14. Mark Harrison? Miller asked. Mark looked up, a forkful of potato halfway to his mouth. He frowned. Yeah? Who's asking? Stand up, please, Miller said. You're under arrest. Mark froze. He blinked. He looked at Cindy, who looked terrified. Then he looked back at the cops. The alcohol gave him courage he shouldn't have had. Arrest. Mark laughed. It was a loud, nervous laugh. For what? Did I park in a handicapped spot? For grand larceny and malicious destruction of property, Miller announced loudly. Mark's face went red. This is about the computer? My brother called you? You gotta be kidding me. Stand up, sir, the uniformed officer said, moving in. It's a civil matter, Mark shouted, slamming his hand on the table. It was a toy. It's family business. You can't arrest me for breaking a toy in my own house. It was state property valued over $5,000, Miller said. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. No, Mark yelled. He stood up, knocking the table. Water glasses tipped over. I'm not going anywhere. My dad knows the foreman. You can't touch me. He shoved the officer. That was the nail in the coffin. You do not shove a cop. Get on the ground, the officer shouted. They took him down. Right there in the middle of the steakhouse. They swept his legs. Mark hit the carpet with a thud that rattled the silverware. He struggled, cursing, screaming about how his brother was a snitch and a coward. They cuffed him. They hauled him up. Cindy was standing there, pressed against the wall, horrified. Cindy, baby, tell them. Mark yelled as they dragged him out. Tell them I didn't do nothing. Cindy didn't say a word. She just looked at the bill on the table, then at the man being dragged away in handcuffs. She grabbed her purse and walked out the back door. She never spoke to him again. Meanwhile, back at the station, I was dealing with my own crisis. Professor Henderson had given me the login for the remote server. I was using a computer in the detective squad room. My hands were sweating as I typed in my credentials. Login. Password. Accessing cloud storage. The screen loaded. I scrolled down the file list. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. File. Beta_backup.zip date. Yesterday, 3 a.m. Size, 4.2 gigabytes. Yes, I whispered. Tears pricked my eyes. It was there. I had lost the last 16 hours of work, yes. I would have to pull an all-nighter to reprocess the final batch. But the core? The 3 years of work? It was safe. I wasn't destroyed. I was just delayed. But my family didn't know that yet. At 10:30 p.m., the police paid a visit to my parents' house. Dad was sitting in his recliner, probably wondering why I hadn't come home to beg for forgiveness yet. He probably expected me to walk in, head hung low, apologizing for making a scene. Instead, there was a pounding on the door. Dad opened it. 2 officers stood there. Frank Harrison? Yeah. We have your son, Mark, in custody at the county lockup. Dad's jaw dropped. Mark? Why? He's on a date. He was arrested for felony destruction of property. And sir, we need to ask you some questions. You were present at the scene, correct? Aye. Dad stammered. It was just a computer. David's computer. It was state evidence, the officer said. And by witnessing it and not reporting it, well, you're not in trouble yet, but you need to understand the severity of this. Your son is facing 1 to 5 years. Dad didn't understand. He couldn't process it. In his world, what happens in the house stays in the house. The idea that the outside world, the law, the government, could reach into his living room and punish his favorite son for disciplining the nerd. It broke his brain. I need to see him, Dad said. You can see him at the arraignment on Monday, the officer said. Or you can post bail. It's set at $10,000. $10,000. Dad choked. Get a lawyer, Mr. Harrison, the officer said, and walked away. I slept at a motel that night. The university paid for it. I didn't sleep much. I spent the night on the motel Wi-Fi, downloading the backup and running the final simulations on a loaner laptop Henderson brought me at midnight. I worked through the anger. I worked through the grief. By sunrise, I had the data ready. Saturday morning came. I uploaded the data at 8 a.m. For hours before the deadline. I sent a text to Henderson. It's done. Ready to defend. Then I turned my attention to the war. Mark spent the weekend in jail. My dad couldn't get the money together until Monday morning. He had to go to a predatory lender, one of those title loan places, and sign over the title to his 2018 Ford F-150. His pride and joy. He got the cash at interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. But getting Mark out of jail was just the beginning. Monday morning was my defense. It was also Mark's arraignment. I put on a suit I bought at a thrift store. I shaved. I looked in the mirror. I looked tired, but I looked dangerous. I looked like a man who had survived a fire. I went to the university. I stood in front of the committee. I didn't think about Mark. I didn't think about Dad. I thought about polymers. I channeled all my rage, all my frustration, into my presentation. I spoke with a clarity and authority I didn't know I possessed. When I finished, there was silence. Then the department chair nodded. Impressive work, David. Especially considering the circumstances. They knew. Everyone knew. I passed. I was Dr. David Harrison. But across town, in the county courthouse, things weren't going so well for Mark. He stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit. He looked small. Without his factory boots, without his bravado, he was just a thug. The district attorney wasn't playing around. Your Honor, the defendant maliciously destroyed research equipment belonging to the state university. The hardware cost is $5,500. But the university is also claiming damages for research delays and data recovery efforts. The total restitution sought is $32,000. $32,000. I heard later that Dad actually gasped in the courtroom. Mark turned white. How do you plead? The judge asked. Mark's public defender whispered in his ear. They had no case. There were fingerprints. There was the broken hardware. There was my testimony. There was Dad's admission to the police that he saw it happen. Guilty, Mark mumbled. He took a plea deal to avoid prison. He got 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and, crucially, a felony conviction on his record. And the restitution. He had to pay the $32,000. If he didn't pay, he went to jail. Mark didn't have $32,000. Mark had $400 in his checking account. So the burden fell to his enablers, my parents. They tried to fight the civil judgment. They hired a cheap lawyer, a guy whose face was on bus benches, to try and argue that I was responsible because I provoked him. The judge looked at the lawyer like he was an idiot. Provocation? By sitting at a desk? Judgment for the plaintiff. My parents had a choice. Let Mark go to prison for violating probation or pay up. They chose Mark. They always chose Mark. They didn't have the cash. The truck was already leveraged for the bail money, which they got back, but the fees ate a chunk of it. They had drained their meager savings. There was only one asset left. The house. The house I grew up in. The house where I was treated like a servant. The house with the peeling paint and the sweaty walls. They had to sell it, and they had to sell it fast. It was a distressed sale. Investors smell blood in the water. They lowballed them. My parents sold their home for 60% of its value just to get the cash quickly to keep Mark out of an orange jumpsuit. After paying off the mortgage, the closing costs, the lawyer fees, and the $32,000 to the university, they were left with almost nothing. And it got worse. Mark went back to the factory on Tuesday, expecting to just walk back in. He was Mark, after all, one of the boys. He swiped his badge. Access denied. Security came out. Mark Harrison? You're terminated. What? Why? No call, no show on Friday. Plus, company policy states we do not employ individuals with active felony convictions for violent property destruction. You're a liability. Mark screamed. He cried. He begged. But the corporate policy was ironclad. He was fired. Dad tried to intervene. He went to the foreman. He tried to pull strings. The foreman looked at Dad and said, Frank, you need to back off. Your son is a felon. If you keep pushing this, we're going to look at your employment too. Dad shut up. But the damage was done. The rumor mill at the factory is vicious. Dad went from being the respected veteran to the guy whose son was a criminal and whose other son, the smart one, had destroyed them. They lost the house. They moved into a crappy 2-bedroom apartment in a bad neighborhood. Dad's commute tripled. Mark was unemployed, living on their couch, drinking cheap beer, and blaming me for everything. It has been 6 months since the snap. I am writing this from my apartment in Boston. It has central air conditioning. It has floor-to-ceiling windows. It is quiet. I accepted a job as a senior research engineer at a biotech firm. My starting salary is $145,000 a year, plus bonuses. I bought a new laptop. It's even better than the one Mark smashed. I bought a 4-terabyte solid-state drive. And you better believe I have triple redundant cloud backups. I haven't seen my parents or Mark since the day I walked out. I didn't go to the closing of the house. I didn't help them move. I keep tabs on them through a cousin, Sarah, who is the only sensible person left in that family. She tells me it's a nightmare over there. Mark is working under the table for a landscaping crew. It's hard, hot work. He makes minimum wage. He can't get a real job because every time they run a background check, felony malicious destruction of property pops up. He's 30 years old, broke, single and bitter. Dad is miserable. He had to delay his retirement. He was planning to retire next year, but with the house gone and the savings drained to pay for Mark's mess, he has to keep working. He's 64, lifting boxes with a bad back and a son who leeches off him. Last week, my phone rang. Unknown number. Usually I ignore them, but I had a feeling. I answered. This is David. Davy. It was Mark. His voice was different. The boom was gone. The arrogance was gone. He sounded tired. He sounded like Dad. What do you want, Mark? I asked. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just pity. And distance. Look, man, Mark stammered. Things are really tight. The apartment rent went up. Dad's blood pressure meds are expensive. We were wondering. I asked. Yeah, me and Dad. Mom too. We were wondering if you could help out. Send a little something? Sarah says you got a big fancy job in Boston. I swiveled my chair around to look at the view of the city. I do have a job. Career, actually. Right, Mark said quickly. That's great. So look, we're family, right? Family helps family. Water under the bridge. Water under the bridge? I repeated. Mark, you destroyed my property. You tried to destroy my future. You laughed in my face. I was stressed. Mark whined. I made a mistake. Why do you have to hold a grudge forever? You're rich now. You can afford to help us. I can, I said. But I won't. What? I won't help you, Mark, because if I send you money, you won't learn. Isn't that what you guys always told me? I need to learn the value of $1. David, don't be a prick, Mark snarled, the old anger leaking through. I have some advice for you, though, I said, since you need money. Yeah. I heard the factory is hiring janitors. Night shift. Is cleaning machines. Like you said, your job is cleaning machines. Remember that. There was a long silence on the other end. Go to hell, Mark whispered. I'm already in heaven, Mark, I said. Don't call this number again. I hung up. Then I blocked the number. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of my servers. They wanted me to be a laborer. They wanted to drag me down into their bucket of crabs. They broke my laptop to break my spirit. But all they did was break the chains. That cracking sound, the snap of the hard drive, wasn't the sound of my life ending. It was the sound of their bankruptcy beginning. I looked at my diploma on the wall. Dr. David Harrison. I earned it. And I earned my freedom. If you are watching this, and you are the black sheep, or the nerd, or the one they make fun of, listen to me. Don't let them break you. Back up your data. Pack your bag. And when the time comes, let them hear the snap. Because the best revenge isn't screaming. It's living a life they can't even imagine. When you cut a tumor out of your body, the hardest part isn't the surgery. It's the phantom pain. It's the moments when you wake up in the middle of the night and reach for a part of yourself that is no longer there. For the first 6 months after I left Ohio, I felt lighter, yes. I felt free. But I also felt a strange, hollow ache where my family used to be. I filled that void with work. I drowned it in success. My life in Boston was everything the dusty, grease-stained house in Ohio wasn't. I lived in a high-rise in the Seaport District. My apartment smelled like sea salt and expensive espresso, not stale beer and regret. I drove a brand-new Audi. I wore tailored suits that didn't itch. My colleagues at the biotech firm treated me with a reverence that bordered on intimidating. To them, I wasn't Mark's little brother or the nerd. I was Dr. Harrison, the lead engineer on the filtration project that was currently revolutionizing municipal water systems in 3 developing countries. But the past has a funny way of not staying buried. Claws at the dirt. It started with a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A thick, cream-colored envelope with gold calligraphy. It was waiting in my mailbox on a Tuesday evening in late October. I recognized the return address immediately. It wasn't my parents'. It was my cousin, Sarah. Sarah was the Switzerland of our family war. She was the daughter of my mom's sister, a sweet girl who worked as a librarian and had always slipped me extra dessert at Thanksgiving when Mark stole mine. She was the only one I had kept in contact with, mostly through brief, guarded text messages. I opened the envelope. An invitation. Sarah Miller and James Reynolds request the honor of your presence. She was getting married. The wedding was in 2 weeks. In Ohio. In the church where I was baptized. The reception was at the local banquet hall where my high school prom had been held. My first instinct was to throw it in the trash. Why would I go back? Why would I voluntarily walk back into the lion's den? I had blocked their numbers. I had erased them from my life. Going back there felt like putting my hand back on a hot stove just to see if it still burned. Then my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. I know you got it. Her text read, Please, David. I know things are bad with Uncle Frank and Mark, but you're my favorite cousin. I want you there. I promise. I'll seat you at a table far away from them. Please. I stared at the phone. I looked out at the Boston harbor, the lights of the city reflecting on the black water. I realized something in that moment. If I didn't go, if I stayed away out of fear or anger, then Mark still had power over me. If I hid in Boston, I was still the scared little brother running away with his backpack. To truly be free, I had to be able to stand in the same room with them and feel nothing. I texted back, I'll be there. I didn't go alone. I brought Elena. Elena was a colleague at the firm, a brilliant neuroscientist with sharp wit and an intolerance for nonsense. We had been dating for 3 months. She knew the story, the abridged version of the laptop smashing. She knew my family was toxic, but she didn't know the visceral reality of it. Are you sure about this? Elena asked as we packed our bags. You have that look in your eye, the one you get when the simulation isn't running right. I need to do this, I said, folding a silk tie. I need to show them that I didn't just survive. I thrived. We flew first class. We rented a luxury SUV at the airport. As we drove down the highway toward my hometown, the landscape shifted. The gleaming skyscrapers faded into strip malls, then into rusted factories and fields of brown corn. The physical sensation of returning was nauseating. Every landmark triggered a memory. There was the high school where Mark shoved me into a locker. There was the diner where Cindy had dumped him. There was the dealership where Dad bought the truck he eventually lost. We checked into the only decent hotel in the next town over. I wasn't about to stay within 10 miles of my parents' apartment. The wedding was on a Saturday afternoon. The air was crisp, smelling of burning leaves and approaching winter. I put on a charcoal gray suit that cost more than my dad used to make in 2 months. I put on my watch, a Tag Heuer I had bought with my signing bonus. It was armor. We pulled up to the church. The parking lot was full of rusted pickup trucks and sedans that had seen better days. My rental car, gleaming in the sun, looked like a spaceship that had landed in the wrong century. Ready. Elena squeezed my hand. Let's do it, I said. Walking into that church was like walking into a time warp. The same peeling wallpaper. The same smell of old hymnals and floor wax. The pews were filling up. I saw faces I hadn't seen in years. Great aunts who pinched my cheeks. Uncles who used to call me Professor with a sneer. Heads turned. The whispering started immediately. Is that David? Look at that suit. Who's the girl? I heard he's rich now. I heard he sued his own father. I kept my head high, walking down the aisle with Elena on my arm. We found our seats on the bride's side, near the front. And then I saw them. They were sitting on the groom's side, 3 rows back. My family. My dad looked 10 years older. His hair was completely white, thinning rapidly. He was wearing a suit that was clearly 20 years old, straining at the buttons around his stomach. He looked tired, his skin gray and pasty. The swagger was gone. My mom sat next to him. She looked smaller, shrunken. She was staring at her hands, twisting a tissue. She wore a dress I remembered her wearing to a funeral 5 years ago. And Mark sat on the end of the pew. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a button-down shirt that was too tight in the neck and a pair of khakis that were stained at the hem. He looked bloated. His face was puffy, his eyes red-rimmed. He had the look of a man who started drinking at noon. He was scowling at the back of a pew, his leg bouncing nervously. They hadn't seen me yet. The organ music started. The ceremony began. I tried to focus on Sarah, who looked beautiful and happy, but I could feel the presence of my family like a cold draft on the back of my neck. It wasn't until the ceremony ended and we were filing out of the church that the inevitable collision happened. The receiving line was forming outside on the steps. I was holding Elena's hand, chatting with an old neighbor who was shocked to hear I lived in Boston. "Is that in Europe?" she had asked, when the crowd parted. They were there, 10 feet away. Dad saw me first. His eyes widened. He stopped moving. It was like he was seeing a ghost. He looked me up and down, taking in the suit, the watch, the confident posture, the beautiful woman on my arm. Then Mark saw me. His reaction was immediate and visceral. His lip curled. His hands balled into fists at his sides. I saw the old familiar rage flare up in his eyes, but it was mixed with something else now. Jealousy. Pure, corrosive jealousy. Mom looked up. Her hand went to her mouth. "David?" she whispered. The crowd around us went silent. Everyone knew the drama. In a small town, a lawsuit between father and son is better gossip than a murder. They were waiting for the explosion. I didn't give them one. I nodded once curtly. "Hello, Frank." "Mom." "Mark." I didn't call him Dad. I called him Frank. I saw him flinch as if I had slapped him. "You came," Mom said, her voice trembling. She took a step toward me, her arms opening slightly as if she expected a hug, as if she hadn't stood by and watched my life get smashed to pieces. "Oh, Davy, you look so." I didn't step forward. I stayed planted. "Sarah invited me. We're here to celebrate her." Mark scoffed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "Look at you," he spat. "Mr. Big Shot. Finally decided to grace us with your presence." "Mark," Dad hissed, grabbing his arm. "Not here." "Why not?" Mark pulled his arm away. His voice was too loud. "He thinks he's better than us. Look at this fancy suit. How much did that cost, Davy?" "More than Dad's car." "Mark, stop it," Sarah said, coming over in her wedding dress, looking panicked. "Please, not today." I looked at Mark. I looked him dead in the eye. "It's good to see you, Mark. I see the landscaping business is treating you well." I glanced pointedly at the dirt under his fingernails and the grass stain on his shoe. It was petty. It was cruel. And it felt fantastic. Mark turned a shade of purple I hadn't seen since the laptop incident. "You think you're funny? You think you're smart?" "I know I am," I said calmly. "I have a doctorate that proves it." "Remember." The reference hung in the air like smoke. "No doctorate for you." Dad stepped in, trying to regain some semblance of authority. He puffed out his chest, but it looked sad now, not intimidating. "David, we need to talk. There are matters to discuss." "There's nothing to discuss, Frank," I said. "The court settled everything. The checks cleared. We're done." "We are family," Mom cried out, tears instantly springing to her eyes. "How can you be so cold? We lost the house, David. We lost everything." "You didn't lose it," I said, my voice ice cold. "You sold it to pay for the crime your son committed. That was a transaction, not a tragedy." "You could have stopped it," Mark yelled. "You could have dropped the charges. And you could have not smashed my laptop," I countered. "Choices have consequences, Mark. I suggest you learn to live with yours. I'm living with mine." I turned to Elena. "Let's go to the car." We walked away. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I could hear Mark cursing under his breath and Dad hushing him. I could hear the whispers of the townspeople exploding into a dull roar. That was intense, Elena whispered as we got into the safety of the rental SUV. That was the appetizer, I said, gripping the steering wheel. The reception is going to be the main course. I knew they wouldn't let it go. I knew Mark had been drinking. I knew Dad was desperate. They saw me as a walking ATM machine, a lottery ticket they had thrown away and were now trying to dig out of the trash. We drove to the banquet hall. I needed a drink, but I stayed sober. I needed my wits sharp. The banquet hall was exactly as I remembered it. Wood paneling from the 1970s, a disco ball that barely spun, and the smell of roast beef and heavy perfume. The DJ was playing Celebration by Kool and the Gang, which felt ironic considering the tension radiating from table 14. Sarah had kept her promise. She seated Elena and me at a table near the front, with her college friends. My family was at a table in the back corner, near the kitchen doors. It was the problem table. For the first hour, we managed to avoid them. I mingled. I danced with Elena. I caught up with cousins I hadn't seen in years. Most of them were polite, even impressed. They asked about Boston, about my research. I realized that outside of my immediate family's toxic bubble, people actually respected what I had done. They didn't see a nerd. They saw a success story. But I kept an eye on the back corner. Mark was drinking, heavily. I watched him throw back beers, then switch to whiskey. He was gesturing wildly, talking to Dad, pointing in my direction. Dad was nodding, looking grim. Mom was just sitting there, staring at me with those sad, manipulative cow eyes. I knew it was coming. It was just a matter of time. It happened during the speeches. The best man had just finished a cringeworthy toast. The room was quiet, people clapping politely. I got up to go to the bar to get Elena a refill of sparkling water. It was a tactical error. I was separated from the herd. As I turned from the bar, drink in hand, they were there. It was an ambush. Mark blocked my path to the left. Dad blocked my path to the right. Mom stood behind them, the silent closer. "We're not done," Mark slurred. He smelled like a distillery. His eyes were unfocused, swimming with rage and self-pity. "I think we are," I said, trying to step around him. Mark shoved my shoulder. Not hard enough to knock me down, but hard enough to spill the water. Hard enough to draw attention. The people at the nearest tables stopped talking. "Don't walk away from your father," Mark growled. "I'm walking back to my table," I said, brushing off my sleeve. "If you touch me again, Mark, I will have security remove you. And given your record, that's a violation of probation. Do you want to go back to jail tonight?" Mark flinched. The threat of jail was the only thing that penetrated the alcohol fog. He took a half step back. Dad stepped forward. He tried a different tactic. The reasonable patriarch. "David," Dad said, his voice lowering to a raspy rumble. "Look, this has gone on long enough. You made your point. You got your pound of flesh. We're living in a rat hole apartment. Your mother cries every night. Are you happy?" "Happiness has nothing to do with it," I said. "I wanted justice. I got it. Justice." Dad spat the word. "You destroyed your brother's life over a computer. You ruined my retirement. That's not justice, that's vengeance. He destroyed my property." I raised my voice slightly. The room was getting quieter. The DJ had faded the music out, sensing the mood. "He tried to destroy my career, Dad, and you stood there and laughed. You said, 'Earn real money. Remember?' I was trying to toughen you up," Dad yelled. "And look, it worked. You're rich now. You're successful. You think you would have fought this hard if we coddled you? I made you, boy. Everything you have is because I pushed you." The audacity took my breath away. He was trying to take credit for my success. He was trying to rewrite history to make his abuse look like tough love. "You didn't make me," I said, my voice vibrating with controlled anger. "You happened to me. I succeeded in spite of you, not because of you. You were an obstacle, a hurdle I had to clear. We sacrificed for you." Mom chimed in, stepping forward. tears streaming down her face. The weaponized tears. I carried you for 9 months. I fed you. We put a roof over your head. And I paid rent for that roof. I countered. I paid you $500 a month to live in a closet with no AC while Mark lived like a king for free. Don't talk to me about sacrifice, Mom. You watched him snap my hard drive and you didn't say a word. You picked a side. You picked the wrong one. He's your brother, Mom wailed. Blood is thicker than water. The full quote, I said loud enough for the tables nearby to hear, is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the bonds you choose are stronger than the ones you're born into. I chose my life. I chose my people. And they aren't you. Mark slammed his hand on the bar counter. The sound echoed through the silent hall. You think you're so smart, Mark sneered, stepping into my personal space. But you're just a selfish little prick. You have all this money, and you won't even help your own parents. They're eating ramen noodles while you drive a luxury car. How do you sleep at night? On a very comfortable mattress, I said. In a home that I own. Paid for by the degree you said I'd never get. Give us the money, Mark demanded. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a robbery. You owe us. The house was worth 200 grand. You owe us that money. I don't owe you a dime, I said. We'll sue you, Dad threatened. We'll sue you for support. Grandparent rights. Something. You have no grandchildren, I reminded him. And you never will from me. And good luck finding a lawyer who will take a case against a man with a team of corporate attorneys on retainer. You're broke, Frank. You have no leverage. You have no power. Mark looked like he was about to swing. I saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. I saw the fist clench. Do it, I whispered. Hit me, please. There are 200 witnesses here. There are cameras. Go ahead, Mark. Finish what you started at the steakhouse. Turn that probation into a 5-year sentence. I'll wait. Mark froze. He looked around the room. He saw the eyes. He saw his cousins, his neighbors, his former high school friends, all staring at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He realized, finally, that he wasn't the hero of this story. He was the villain, and a pathetic one at that. He lowered his hand. He looked at the floor. You're dead to me, Mark whispered. I've been dead to you for years, I said. I was just a ghost you bullied. Now I'm a ghost that haunts you. Goodbye, Mark. I turned to my parents. Don't contact me. Don't call me. If you show up at my apartment in Boston, I will file for a restraining order. If you try to sue me, I will countersue for legal fees and bury you so deep in debt you'll never see sunlight. Stay away. I walked away. I walked back to my table. Elena was standing there, looking fierce, ready to jump in if needed. I took her hand. We're leaving, I said. Did you get everything you needed to say? She asked. Yes, I said. Everything. We walked out of the banquet hall. But before I left, I stopped at the gift table. I took out my checkbook. I wrote a check to Sarah and her new husband. It was for $10,000. I put it in an envelope and wrote on the front, "Have a great honeymoon. Thanks for the invitation, David." I wanted my family to know about it later. I wanted them to know that I wasn't stingy. I wasn't miserly. I was generous to those who treated me with kindness. I wanted them to know that the money was there. It was just forever out of their reach. We drove back to the hotel in silence. But it wasn't a heavy silence. It was the silence of a final door closing. The next morning, we flew back to Boston. As the plane took off, I looked down at the grid of Ohio one last time. I saw the gray smudge of the factory. I saw the tiny houses. I didn't feel the phantom pain anymore. The surgery was finally complete. The wound was cauterized. I turned to Elena. What do you want to do for dinner tonight? Sushi? She suggested. Perfect, I said, and I never looked back. That is the story of how a smashed laptop led to my freedom. It's a heavy story, and I know a lot of you watching might be dealing with toxic family dynamics right now. Here is the lesson I want you to take away from this. We are raised to believe that family is everything. We are told to forgive, to forget, to turn the other cheek because they're your blood. But there is a line. When family becomes an anchor that drags you down, when they actively sabotage your future to make themselves feel better, they lose the right to that title. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Protecting your mental health, your career, and your future is not an act of betrayal. It is an act of survival. You are allowed to outgrow people who refuse to grow with you. You are allowed to succeed without feeling guilty that they stayed behind. Success is the best revenge, but peace is the ultimate prize. I want to hear from you guys in the comments. What is the hardest boundary you've ever had to set with a family member? Did you have to cut someone off to save yourself? Or if you just enjoyed the story and the justice, drop the word good in the comments so I know you're with me. Thanks for listening. Stay focused, back up your data, and never let anyone smash your dreams.